Gretchen and I for Chaucer's. Thank you for coming, and take it away, ladies.
Thank you, Michael.
Well, first off, I'd like to say congratulations for your 20th published book. Quite an achievement, to say the least. And I think maybe a great place to start is tell us about your inspiration for this particular project.
Absolutely. First, I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank you on a beautiful Thursday night in June. It takes a lot to come out. I really appreciate it. Of course, I can sign my brother. He had to come. But other than that, and my best friend, Erin. And I just really appreciate it. And thank you so much, Chaucer's, for hosting this event. It's just independent bookstores. Unfortunately, you know, there are not as many of them as there used to be, and we just really need to support our independent bookstores. And independent bookstores tell you something about a community. If there's a good, independent, vibrant bookstore in a community, that means the community is healthier and more robust because they're book readers. So anyway, so long
Agree
100%
yes.
to former book
Yeah,
owner.
absolutely.
So that's all the good stuff. Now you want to talk about the bad guy? Sure.
Yeah.
So Erin asked me about my inspiration. I really think it goes back to my dad, our dad, who was an FBI agent. And, you know, I heard about Hansen from him, and what I heard was this horrible tale of how this one man had really besmirched the FBI, brought down the reputation for everybody, brought down morale for the line agents who are out there serving us every day and really, you know, trying to do God's work and keeping us safe. And so I'd heard about him so much through my father, and I was interested in the man, and I realized, wait, it's been 20 years since he was arrested and sentenced. I'll bet in hindsight we can learn a lot about what actually happened, why it happened, his motivations, and my interest in writing a book that's historical is also to look forward and to say, what can we learn about what happened, and how can we make sure it never happens again? And so for all of those reasons, Hansen was just the logical person for me to look at. And once I got started and doing the research and the interviews, then it's just a detective game, and that's a lot of fun.
So tell us about Robert Hansen. I mean, he on the surface seemed, well, a little odd, but still within the normal range.
Right.
And yet he gave himself over to the Russians almost immediately when he started at the FBI.
That's right.
Yeah.
Within a year
Within a
of
year.
joining the FBI, he reaches out to the Russians, to a guy named Cherkashin, who would eventually become his handler. He reaches out to them. They don't have to flip him. In other words, they don't have to come to him and say, you know, please, would you give us information? We have all this piles of money. He goes to them within a year of being an FBI agent. Now here's a guy who had a pretty, I think we would all say, normal upbringing. The father was pretty tough on him. That's very clear, and we would call it child abuse, I think. But other than that, you know, he wanted to be in the FBI. He wanted to be sort of a James Bond type character. He gets into the FBI, and within a year, he is sending a missive to Cherkashin saying, here's what I've got for you, here's information, and basically turns himself over to the Russians. But, as you were talking about before, the way he presented himself to the rest of the world was this devout Catholic, Opus Dei, went to Mass every day, called the Russians commies, godless people, you know, and had tremendous amount of disdain for them. And so that was the outside persona that Hansen, you know, portrayed to the world. Whereas on the other side here, he was spying for the Russians. I mean, it's just an incredible tale of compartmentalization at the very least.
Yes, exactly. And Dr. David Charney, who interviewed him, psychiatrist, I believe it was twice a week for a year,
That's
once he
right.
was captured, also agreed with the compartmentalization factor with him, that was, I mean, he was almost very extreme.
Right.
We all do it to a certain
We all
extent.
do it. We have to in our lives to juggle things. But yeah, Charney, Dr. David Charney, who was a psychiatrist, a very well-renowned psychiatrist, was hired by the defense to interview Hansen to find out exactly the kind of things we were talking about. Motivation, why did he do it? What else did he know? Were there secrets that we didn't know yet? And Charney came away with it just, he said, Lis, you know, I've seen compartmentalization going on in lives before. But this was just so incredible that he was able, again, you know, to portray this devout Catholic, I mean, anti-abortion, you know, anti-homosexual, I mean, just everything. And instead was doing the most heinous kind of thing to our country.
And functioning every day, and
Right.
with the
At a high level, right.
Yeah, with his colleagues, and still, it seemed like the people he worked with didn't particularly like him, and maybe that kind of played into some of his long-term success, because he was kind of always at a little bit of an arm's distance, right. From the others.
He was. His colleagues, a lot of them called him the mortician, because he dressed in black, and he always had this kind of dour expression on his face, and he never wanted to engage in the social things. I mean, FBI agents work hard, they play hard. And he didn't want to play hard. He didn't want to get involved in any of the socializing. So they thought he was creepy, but not a spy.
Right.
You know, and he was very much into the computers, into IT. So that put him in kind of a different category too, because again, FBI agents, they're not so much about computers. They're still really bad. They're still way behind. That's another story. They're more about going out and getting the bad guys and making the arrests, that kind of thing. Right. And Hansen loved the computers, kind of took over a lot of the computerization, and he was eventually signed to the very top level of the counter-espionage division against Russia. So we have a guy at the very top level of our counter-espionage selling secrets to the Russians.
And what kind of secrets did he give over? Starting, you know, I know there was the big one in the beginning.
Right.
That was kind of gave him the in with the Russians, kind of verified his value to them.
That's exactly right, Erin. The first thing that he gave over was the identity of a Russian that was called Polyakov. Top Hat was his code name, and he had been spying for us for years. He was a Russian asset. You know, Russian asset is somebody that we flipped, that's working for us, that has high-level intel for us, and we need those guys and women because, you know, what we get from the political channels is only a part of it. What you need to have really good counterintelligence, whether it's Russia, China, North Korea, wherever, is to, you know, seek out, recruit these assets that are working for you. So Hansen delivered to the Russians our top person in Russia. And when he did that, they got the information. Was there a trial? You can answer that. Of course not. They executed him in the most heinous of way. I just kind of start off my first chapter with the way they executed him, and then videotaped the whole thing to deter other would-be potential Russian agents. So he did that. That was his beginning. He kept, during the course of his 20 years, giving over intel about different spies, and to the point where we didn't have anybody that was spying for us on the ground anymore. In addition to that, he gave over top secrets about our nuclear plans, about where the president and vice president would be at any point, so if the Russians wanted to, you know, get them, they could. I mean, we're talking about the worst kind of secrets to give over.
Oh, valuable. And
yeah.
So, what was his motivations, really, to do these, I mean, high crimes like this against his own country?
That's such a great question, Erin, and I'm not sure I've completely answered it. I'll take a stab, which is, first of all, money. Again, he's Catholic, his wife didn't work much outside the house, and he had 5 kids, all went to parochial schools, all the fanciest private parochial schools, and when they moved him to New York, I don't know if you know this, Christopher, but when Dad got signed to New York, that's when he quit the FBI. Yeah, you knew that? Because he said, I'm not bringing a little girl and my wife to New York. We can't afford to live there. So he became a federal prosecutor.
Probably Mom really wanted to go either.
Mom didn't want to go to New York? No, that's probably, she wouldn't like that. But so Hansen goes to New York. He moves to Scarsdale, which is a very affluent Westchester community, on an FBI salary, which is really hard to do. Puts all these kids through parochial school, so he needs money. But, you know, money is a primary motivator. It's not the only motivator. I don't think money is ever enough to get someone to actually sell out their country after they've taken an oath to protect it. So there were other things, like his best friend Jack Hoshauer told me when he was a little kid he loved James Bond, everything James Bond. You know, he had to be the glamour, he had to save the damsel in distress, all of that. And of course, he wasn't really that in his real life. Nobody thought of him as a James Bond type character at all.
The opposite.
And so he thought, he was also very narcissistic, always had to be the smartest guy in the room. We all know people like that, and it's not a lot of fun to be around them. But he, you know, he thought he was the smartest, and he didn't think the FBI appreciated him enough, that they were kind of dullards, many of the agents. This is Hansen thinking. And that he was smarter, and he wasn't appreciated. And here the Russians, flowery letters, money, diamonds, they loved him, they appreciated him. I mean, it's that same old story about people, you know, so eager for that appreciation, that adoration, that, you know, they'll go to these extremes. So you put all those things together, the money, the James Bond, the disgruntled employee, the feeling like he's the smartest guy in the room and nobody appreciates him, and then the Russians and their response. And I think those are the motivations. And also, as Charney said, the compartmentalization, that he was able to do that and think he was still a good guy.
Separate it.
Yeah.
And he did it for 2 decades.
20 years he got away with it.
And there were opportunities to catch him.
Yes.
The Puffs of Smoke
Puffs of
chapter,
Smoke,
which was one of my favorites. And somehow or another, nothing took.
Nothing took. Even, I mean, Bonnie, his wife, found him out very early on. And she, I mean, it's almost hilarious. It's not funny, but it is sort of when you think about it. She finds money in the sock drawer. And she thinks his cash, it's a lot of cash, she thinks it's for a mistress of Hansen's, right? He's going to spend it first thought. Wow. So she goes to him and says, you know, he's spending this money on a mistress. He says, oh no, honey, I'm making fun of Badillo here. Oh no, honey, I'm not cheating on you. I'm just spying for the Russians. That's what this money's for. And so then they go to a Catholic priest. She says, Bonnie says, let's go to a Catholic priest and we'll figure it out. They go to the Catholic priest, and the priest says, spying, bad. Don't do that again. But it'll be okay. You'll be absolved if you just give the money you've made over to the church. Which Hansen does. He does. Bonnie's satisfied, and he stops for a little bit, and then goes merrily back on his way spying and makes sure that he doesn't put the money in the sock drawer again. But I mean, there are all these kinds of puffs of smoke. A lot of things happen like that. That the FBI just didn't think it was him.
And also the way the secrets were exchanged, the money, the secrets was very brazen.
Oh yeah.
Well, literally in plain sight.
Literally in plain sight in a park. Hansen would always say to the handler where and when the drop was going to happen. And by drop, I mean literally a drop of information at a certain place in a park in D.C. or New York, which is where he was living. And then the Russians knew when to pick it up and when to deliver their money. It was very low tech.
Yeah.
I mean, he was copying stuff off on the Xerox machine outside his office, stuffing it in his briefcase and walking out. And nobody said anything or thought anything. Oh, it's just Hansen, being Hansen.
Exactly right. It's almost like his strange, well, it is, his strange persona helped him to go undetected for a long time because he was so odd that, like for instance, when he hacked into a colleague's computer.
Yes. Yeah, so at one point, another puff of smoke, as I call them, was when he hacked into another FBI agent's computer, and he was caught. And so you'd think there would be, you know, some repercussions from that. And he said, oh, no, I was just hacking into that computer because I wanted to show you, other agents, how bad or how frail our system, or fragile our system really is. Now I'll go about fixing it. But I just needed to show you so you would believe me. And they believed it. These are FBI agents. I mean, it's a very trusting culture once you're in, and I understand that to a certain point because you need to be able to trust your partner, right? You're going out there and bullets are flying and you need to trust the person that you're with. But, you know, what's that old phrase, trust but verify.
Absolutely. And so kind of brings it, the book is so deeply researched. It's just fascinating. And during the course of your research, did you have an opportunity to meet some of his colleagues and talk to them?
I talked
and get feedback?
yes, so many of them. The FBI actually helped me out. I had done a book before on the Unabomber and the FBI's investigation of the Unabomber, and the FBI felt that I had treated them fairly, you know, good side, bad side. And so they even sent a letter out, an internal letter out to all the retired FBI agents out there in the U.S. saying, Lis would like to talk to you if you know anything about Hansen, ever worked with him or anything like that. So when I say detective work, it really was, because I get one email or a text and that lead me to somebody else, it lead me to somebody else, and it's that old, well, so-and-so said that, you could give me some information, and my dad was an FBI agent, I was a federal prosecutor, so I'm not just a journalist. And it's harder for them to hang up the phone on me when I say that. And that got me to amazing sources like his best friend, the wife of a CIA agent who was wrongfully targeted, just amazing people. And that's kind of the fun of putting together a nonfiction like this.
Yeah, and so talking with the wrongfully targeted CIA agent, Brian Kelly.
Right.
And he really went through the ringer with that, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, because at a certain point, basically 20 years into spying, the FBI woke up and said, we don't have any more assets on the ground in Russia. There must be a spy. And so they finally figured out there was a spy. And so the FBI set up a task force to figure out who the mole was. And they targeted the CIA. CIA is not part of this task force, but they targeted the CIA thinking, in history there have been more CIA than FBI agents who have spied. So it's probably a CIA agent. And they kind of went in with that mentality. They had a group of people that were called the vault people, and that's because they literally were in a vault. I mean, no windows or anything like that. And they put this matrix together, the vault people did. And in that vault, in that matrix, landed Brian Kelly, a CIA agent who was arrested. His daughter was also a CIA agent. She was walked out of the building. His wife, his children were rousted from bed, basically, or taken from the airport. I mean, all this other stuff. And the whole country believed that Brian Kelly was a super spy that was trying to take down the United States. And that happened, that kind of surveillance on him and notoriety for him went on even after they figured out it was Hansen, because they didn't want to let, alert him that they knew.
Right.
And I spoke with Kelly's widow, Patricia McCarthy, who said that Brian really never recovered from that. I mean, he was such a good CIA agent, the kids never really even knew what he did. That's typical for CIA. And he just never really recovered. He died early, and it was very sad. She did get sort of an apology from the FBI, but it was kind of lukewarm, honestly.
Yeah, the stress.
They could have done more.
And it went on for quite a while.
Quite a while, months.
Didn't they threaten to interview his
mother
in assisted care?
Yep, would have killed her, he said, so it was they were pretty brutal. But the FBI, I mean, if they think they've got a guy, that's what they do. They're pretty, it's not a picnic. But for example, he passed a polygraph, right? So I talked to the polygrapher who actually gave him that polygraph, and he said, Kelly passed it. But they told him that the other agents really leading the mole hunt said, it's your fault, you didn't read the polygraph right, or Kelly was just too smart and he outsmarted you. But we're not going to believe, basically, the polygraph. And
well, they had the confirmation bias.
Yeah, exactly, confirmation bias.
Yeah, and they just kept discarding the facts that didn't fit.
Right.
And hanging on to the ones that did fit for poor Brian Kelly.
For Brian Kelly.
Yeah.
Collateral damage from Hansen.
Absolutely, absolutely. But they did catch him eventually.
They did. They did.
And that's a great story.
Yes. After they realized that they didn't have any, they didn't have any more assets, and they set up this matrix. Well, the drop still happened even after, Kelly was arrested. So I kind of realized it probably wasn't Kelly, although they were still kind of hoping it was, so they wouldn't be wrong. And then the head of the unit that was looking into Hansen, a guy named Mike Rochford, got a Russian asset who, for $7 million, gave over an audio cassette of Hansen, a couple other things, some fingerprints, but mostly the audio cassette was important, of Hansen talking to Cherkashin, his handler. And once the FBI agents, without bias, listened to the voices, it took them a while because they weren't thinking it was Hansen, but then they finally realized it was Hansen, and then they knew that Hansen was the guy.
Yeah, he had that distinct whispering voice.
He had a whispering voice, that's right, because he was weird. He was a weird guy. Whispered all the time, we're black, I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
But anyway, at that point, that wasn't enough to arrest him or to go to trial on him. Because what do they have? You think of, as a trialer, what do you got? You got You got a Russian asset for which you paid $7 million and are moving he and his family over here because he's being chased down by the Russian mob or whatever back in Russia. And he doesn't want to take the stand. You got nothing. You got no solid evidence as a prosecutor. So they realized that, and they set up a sting operation to get Hansen, set up a false office, false job, gave him false intel to sell to the Russians, which he finally did, and was caught in one of the forests where he had made a drop. And as this charming young woman, what was your name again, Marilyn?
Doris.
Yes. Knew he said when they caught him, what took you so long? I mean, the arrogance of this guy.
Yeah.
You know, he's even he's passive aggressive with the FBI to the end. He's gonna make his
to get
point.
the last word.
Right. Well, the last word now is he's in Florence, Colorado, in a supermax.
That is
and
definitely the last word.
23 hours solitary confinement, and he gets to hang out with people like the Unabomber that I wrote about, who's also in 23 hours solitary, and El Chapo. So I'm sure they have tea time and talk about all this stuff. It's hoots of fun.
Yeah. So that was, a lot of that was the Cold War.
Yeah.
And then, but what are your thoughts on how robust the spy industry is today?
Now?
Yeah.
Well, that was kind of a very sobering revelation that I discovered it took me about 2 years to write this book. So over all of these interviews, I mean, I talked to the top level of CIA, you know, we're talking about George Tenet, we're talking about Louis III at the FBI, and on down, past and present agents and officers. And I asked them all the same question in my interview. And I started with this question as really sort of a throwaway line. I didn't really think about it much. I said, could there be another Hansen today? Thinking that'd be kind of a nice way to wrap the interview up. But it turned into much more than a throwaway line when all of them said, I mean, 2 of 1, yes. And then unprompted by me, many of them said, and there probably already is. Now you think about that, where we are today in our relationship with Russia and Ukraine vis-a-vis Ukraine, that's frightening. I mean, that really is, and we need to be aware of those possibilities to protect ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And the morale of the FBI,
The morale of the
has
line
been kicked around a
agents,
little bit the last
absolutely.
few years.
It has been by the politics from the top, which makes me so sad because, you know, the FBI and the CIA should not be political organizations. They're meant to be law enforcement, and that's all. And so it's been very sad to see some of the things that have happened in the past few years. And the saddest part is, again, for agents like my dad, you know, who are just out there trying to do their job, to see morale kick so low. It's disturbing. But we need to know about it so we can fix it and make sure it doesn't happen again, right?
Absolutely. So what did your dad think of the book?
What's my dad think of the book? Well, even if he didn't like it, he wouldn't tell me. But no, he says he really likes it.
Of course he does. Of course he does.
But my mom is the grammarian in the household, so if there's anything misspelled, I'm sure she will point that out to me.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's a wonderful combination of having the law enforcement background and your dad with the FBI, and then your mom.
PhD in literature, my mom,
And
who's
then-
Danish, by the way.
And the product is here.
Well,
Right?
and there.
Yeah, and there, absolutely. It was kind of a natural course for you to become a writer in many ways.
It really was. I think I was sort of doomed to become a writer because the one rule in our family, Christopher knows this, is that you had to be home for family dinner every night, right? It didn't matter what mom was cooking, it was just, we had to be home, 4 of us for family dinner, and Dad would tell stories. And as a little kid, I didn't know what those, I thought there were stories, bad guys and all that.
Right.
But, you know, there were real people.
Uh-huh.
And cases he'd prosecuted or cases that he had been an FBI agent, and he had a fascinating career. And so, and then my mom, of course, would correct everybody's grammar and make sure that we were saying everything correctly. So I was sort of stuck, and I loved Nancy Drew, the Hardy Boys, and all that from when I was a little kid.
Oh,
So
best.
mysteries and crime were just sort of what I gravitated towards.
That's fabulous. And we're all glad you did. I'll tell you
Thank
that
you. I'm
much.
glad I'm here in Santa Barbara with my new friends and Erin being here so sweetly. Her husband's right there, going out Rick. And Tanya, my neighbor, walked in. I just saw her. beautiful lady with the long hair. Tanya, you're not yeah. But Tanya, yeah. And so I really appreciate, friends and neighbors and family coming out. And thank you, Zoe. Really, really appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. And do you have any questions? Please ask questions. Or you